Nobody saw it coming. Not the woman with the stroller who had stepped back from the curb just in time. Not the delivery driver who had run the light without seeing the crosswalk signal. Not the 14 people standing at the intersection of Caldwell and 5th on a Tuesday morning in September who had each been looking at something else entirely. A phone, a coffee cup, the middle distance of a city morning. When the black SUV came through at 38 miles per hour and the world reorganized itself around a single decision made in less than 1 second. Only one person had been watching the street. He had been watching it the way he watched most things, quietly and without announcing it, because that was how he had learned to move through the world after years of understanding that the things that go wrong rarely announce themselves in advance. His name was Joel Castillo. He was 34 years old. He was standing at the corner of Caldwell and 5th with a paper cup of coffee and a rolled-up building assessment report tucked under his left arm, waiting for the walk signal, when he saw the little girl step off the curb. She was perhaps 5 years old. She had broken away from the woman beside her in the particular way that small children break away from the people holding their hands, not with intent, just with the sudden distraction of something across the street that required immediate investigation. A pigeon. It was a pigeon. Joel saw it too. In the half-second, before everything else happened, a fat gray pigeon standing in the crosswalk as if it owned the intersection, which, in its experience, it probably did. The girl stepped off the curb. The SUV came through the red light. Joel moved. He did not think about it. There was nothing to think. The calculation had already been made in some part of his mind that operates below language and decision-making, the part that had been trained over 8 years to assess a situation and commit to a response before the conscious brain had finished processing the question. He dropped the coffee. He dropped the report. He covered the distance between the sidewalk and the girl in 4 steps and took the impact on his left side, turning his body so that he absorbed the force of the SUV's front quarter panel across his shoulder and upper back rather than across the child, and they went down together onto the asphalt on the far side of the vehicle's path. The SUV kept going for another 40 feet before it stopped. The girl was unhurt. Joel lay on the asphalt for approximately 3 seconds, doing a rapid internal inventory of the kind he had learned to perform quickly and without drama, cataloging what had happened to his body and determining what was structural and what was not. Left shoulder, impact absorbed, functional. Upper back, bruised, not broken. Right palm, scraped from the asphalt, minor. He sat up. The girl was sitting beside him, looking at the pigeon, which had relocated to the opposite sidewalk and was regarding the situation with the philosophical indifference of a city bird that had seen worse. She looked at Joel. She said the bird moved. He said yes. She said she was glad the bird was okay. He said he was glad she was okay. She thought about this for a moment and then nodded, which seemed to resolve the matter to her satisfaction. The woman who had been holding her hand reached them seconds later and pulled the girl into her arms and began the particular kind of crying that parents produce when fear converts to relief faster than the body can process the transition. Several people from the intersection had moved toward them. Someone was on the phone. Someone else was taking photographs. The delivery driver had gotten out of the SUV and was standing 20 feet away with the expression of a man who understood that his morning had just become something he would not recover from easily. Joel stood up slowly. He retrieved his coffee cup from the gutter. It was empty. He looked at the building assessment report on the asphalt, partially unrolled, and picked it up and rolled it back and tucked it under his arm. He checked the time. He was going to be 4 minutes late to his appointment. The woman who had been holding the girl was saying something to him, words that were arriving in a blur of gratitude and shock, and he said the things that seemed appropriate to say and meant them, and then he looked at his watch again and said he needed to get going, and she said, "Please wait. Please, I need to get your name. I need to give you something." And he said there was nothing to give, and she said there was everything to give, and he said he hoped the girl had a good Tuesday and that the pigeon did too. He crossed the street. He did not look back. What he did not know, because he was already moving and because his attention had returned to the building assessment he was going to be late for, was that there was a woman standing on the opposite side of the intersection who had watched every moment of what just happened from the window of the car service vehicle that had stopped at the red light on 5th. Her name was Nora Chen. She was 41 years old. She was the founder and chief executive of Ardent Logistics, a supply chain technology company she had built from a 3-person operation in a shared office space 11 years ago into a regional firm with 220 employees and a client roster that included 4 of the largest retail distributors on the Eastern Seaboard. She was precise, demanding, and privately known among her senior staff as someone who had an extraordinary ability to identify the real quality of a person in a very short window of observation. She had been on her way to a board preparation meeting when the SUV ran the light. She had seen the man drop his coffee and his papers and move. She had seen the calculation in his body before the movement began, the stillness that preceded it, the complete absence of hesitation. She had seen him sit up afterward and check the child, check himself, retrieve his things, and check his watch. She had seen him decline to be photographed or named or thanked in any meaningful way. She had watched him cross the street and disappear around the corner at the pace of a man who was simply continuing his morning. Nora Chen sat in the back of the car service vehicle for a long moment after the light changed and did not move. Her assistant leaned forward from the front seat and said that they were going to be late if they didn't move. She said she knew. She said she needed a minute. He gave her one. She was thinking about something she had been thinking about for 6 weeks, a problem she had not yet solved, a gap in her organization that had been growing in significance since her head of operations had resigned in July to relocate across the country with his family. The role was not simply administrative, it was structural. The person who filled it needed to be the kind of person who understood what mattered in a crisis and responded to it without requiring permission or applause. She had interviewed 9 candidates. None of them had been what she was looking for. She had not been entirely sure what she was looking for until this exact moment. She said to her assistant that she wanted to find the man who had just crossed the corner of Caldwell and 5th. Her assistant looked at her. She said she was serious. He took out his phone. Joel Castillo, as it turned out, was not difficult to find. He had a professional profile, a contractor's license, and a website for his one-man safety assessment practice that had been operating for 3 years. His biography was 4 sentences. His client list was regional. He had worked previously for a federal infrastructure assessment agency for 6 years and had left, according to the brief public record of the matter, following a workplace restructuring that had eliminated his division. The restructuring had eliminated his division because the agency had decided to contract the function externally. The irony of this was not lost on anyone who had read the subsequent 2-year audit report, indicating that the contracted firm had missed 17 significant structural deficiencies across facilities that Joel Castillo's team had previously maintained without incident. The audit report was not widely read. These things rarely are. What the professional profile did not mention, because professional profiles are not designed to contain the information that actually defines a person, was that Joel Castillo had a daughter named Maya who was 6 years old and who had been with him through all of it. The restructuring, the 3 years of building something new from the ground up, the particular arithmetic of single parenthood that involves calculating everything twice and sleeping less than you should. Maya had her father's dark eyes and her mother's gift for reading a room, and she had recently developed the opinion that their apartment needed a dog, an opinion she advanced at regular intervals with the strategic patience of someone who understood that timing mattered in negotiations. Joel had been a single father since Maya was 2. He did not discuss the circumstances of this with people he had recently met. It was a part of his life that had been difficult in the way that some things are difficult, not dramatically, not with a clean resolution, but with the slow, accumulating weight of a situation that requires you to become someone different than you were, and to decide whether the person you are becoming is someone you can respect. He had decided yes. He was late to his appointment by 6 minutes. The site supervisor he was meeting shook his hand and said nothing about the state of his jacket, which had asphalt on the left shoulder and a small tear at the back seam. Joel noticed him not mentioning it and appreciated the professional courtesy. He did the assessment, he wrote the report, he picked Maya up from school at 3:15, which was when he always picked her up, and she got into the car and immediately told him that her friend Daniela had a dog and that the dog had come to school for show and tell and that everyone had agreed it was the best show and tell of the year. Joel said that sounded like a good show and tell. Maya said she was just providing information. He said he understood. She looked out the window for a moment and then said that his jacket had a hole in it. He said he knew. She said what happened. He said he had a small incident on the way to work. She looked at him. He said everyone was fine. She studied his profile for another moment with the expression she wore when she was deciding whether the information she had been given was complete. She determined that it was complete enough and looked back out the window. She said that Daniela's dog was a beagle. He said beagles were good dogs. She said she was aware of that. The call from Nora Chen's office came the following morning. It was placed by her assistant, who introduced himself and said that his employer had witnessed an incident at the intersection of Caldwell and 5th the previous morning and that his employer would like to speak with Joel Castillo at his earliest convenience regarding a professional opportunity. Joel was standing in his kitchen making Maya's lunch when the call came. He held the phone between his ear and his shoulder and continued making the sandwich because the bread was going to go stale if he set it down. He said he wasn't sure what incident was being referenced. The assistant said it was the one involving the black SUV and the child in the crosswalk. Joel set the bread down. He said he appreciated the call, but that he didn't think he had done anything that warranted a professional conversation. The assistant said his employer disagreed and asked if Thursday at 11 would work. Joel looked at the calendar on the refrigerator, which was a printed paper calendar held up by a magnet that said, "World's Most Adequate Dad," a gift from Maya that she had selected from a school fundraiser display with the particular care of a child who had read every option and chosen the one she found most accurate. He said Thursday at 11 worked. That evening, Maya sat at the kitchen table doing her homework while Joel cooked dinner. She had her notebook open and was writing with the focused application of a child who had not yet decided whether she liked the subject but was determined to do it correctly regardless. Joel was cutting vegetables and watching her from across the counter. She looked up at him. She said her teacher had told them that being brave meant doing something scary. He said that was one way to think about it. She said, was there another way? He thought about it for a moment. He said that sometimes being brave was not doing something scary. Sometimes it was doing something necessary so quickly that there was no time to be scared. She considered this. She said that was more complicated than what her teacher said. He said most true things were. She wrote something in her notebook. He asked what she was writing. She said she was writing down what he said because she thought it might be on a test someday. He said he hoped her teacher would give her credit for it. She said she planned to cite her source. He said that was good academic practice. She looked back at her homework with the expression of a 6-year-old who had efficiently resolved a philosophical question and was ready to move on to long division. The offices of Ardent Logistics occupied the 14th floor of a building on Merchant Street, a clean and functional space that communicated competence without performance. Joel arrived 2 minutes early, which was when he arrived at things. The receptionist directed him to a conference room where a glass wall looked out over the city. He was looking at the city when Nora Chen came in. She was shorter than he had expected, which he recognized was not a useful observation, and she moved through the room with the directness of someone who had decided before she entered exactly what she intended to accomplish. She shook his hand and looked at him in the way she apparently looked at things, which was directly and without the social preamble most people used as a buffer. She said she appreciated him coming. He said he appreciated the call. She said she was going to be direct because she found it more efficient. He said he preferred that. She said she had watched him at that intersection for approximately 7 seconds before he moved and that she had seen something she did not often see, which was a person who identified a problem, committed to a response, and acted without requiring anyone else's acknowledgement or permission. She said she had been looking for that quality in a specific role for 6 weeks and had not found it in 9 interviews. She said she thought she had found it on a street corner on a Tuesday morning, which was not how she had expected the search to conclude, but which was, in her experience, how the most important things tended to happen. Joel looked at her for a moment. He said he was a one-man safety assessment practice and that he was not sure how that translated to whatever she was describing. She slid a folder across the table. She said the role was Director of Operations. She said it involved overseeing the logistics infrastructure for a 220-person organization, managing relationships with 7 major distribution clients, and building a crisis response function that the company had never properly formalized. She said it was not a small job. He looked at the folder. He said he had not done anything like this before. She said she knew what he had done before and that she thought it was more relevant than he was giving it credit for. He said he would need time to review it. She said she would give him a week. He closed the folder and looked at her. He said he had a question. She said go ahead. He said he wanted to understand what she was actually looking for beneath the job description because job descriptions described functions and she seemed to be describing something else. Nora Chen looked at him for a moment. She said she was looking for someone who understood that the most important decisions in an organization were made in the moments when no one was watching and no one would know either way, and that the quality of those decisions was the actual character of the person making them. She said she had watched him make one of those decisions in 7 seconds on a street corner, and she had found it more informative than anything she had learned in 9 formal interviews with 9 formally qualified candidates. He said that seemed like a significant amount of weight to put on 7 seconds. She said most things that mattered happened in less than that. He took the folder home. He read it at the kitchen table after Maya was asleep with a cup of coffee and the paper calendar visible on the refrigerator and the world's most adequate dad magnet holding it there with the quiet certainty of a 6-year-old's editorial judgment. He read the job description twice. He read the company financials that she had included in the folder, which was either a gesture of unusual transparency or a test of whether he would actually read them. He read both. He made notes in the margin with a pencil, systematically, with the particular attention of someone who understood that what a document said and what it meant were not always the same thing. At 11:15, he set the folder down and sat with his coffee and looked at the refrigerator. The world's most adequate dad magnet was slightly crooked. Maya had put it up herself, which meant it was going to stay exactly where it was. He thought about the intersection. He thought about the girl and the pigeon and the 7 seconds that Nora Chen had apparently been measuring with more precision than he had applied to them. He thought about 6 years at the agency and 3 years on his own and the way both of those things had shaped him into exactly who he was, which was a person who knew what mattered and what didn't and was no longer willing to spend significant energy pretending otherwise. He thought about Maya at 2 years old, the night everything changed. Sitting in the kitchen of a different apartment, eating crackers with the focused concentration of a toddler for whom the world was still entirely composed of the immediate and the manageable. He had sat across from her and understood that this was now his entire job and that he had better be good at it. He thought he had been. Not perfectly, not without the accumulating evidence of every mistake and every recalculation, but in the ways that actually counted, in the ways she would carry forward, yes. He thought he had been adequate in the way the magnet said. He thought adequate, honestly applied, was quite a lot. He called Nora Chen's office the next morning. Her assistant answered. Joel said he had a few questions before he could give her an answer. The assistant said she would call him back within the hour. She called back in 14 minutes. They talked for 45 minutes. He asked about the specific nature of the crisis response function she wanted to build, about the operational gaps she had identified during the transition, about what had actually gone wrong in the 7 months since her previous operations head had left, not the official version, but the real version. She answered him directly on all of it. She did not use the language organizations use when they are managing a narrative. She described what had broken, what she had learned from it breaking, and what she needed. He listened without interrupting. At the end, she said she had a question for him. He said, "Go ahead." She said she wanted to know if there was anything about his current situation, anything at all, that would make accepting a full-time senior role difficult. She said she was not asking because it would change her interest in him. She was asking because she needed to understand what accommodations, if any, the role needed to fit the person rather than the other way around. He said he had a 6-year-old daughter and that he was her only parent and that there were specific times of day that were not available for negotiation. She said she had a 7-year-old son and that she understood completely. There was a brief pause. He said 3:15 was non-negotiable. She said 3:15 was a reasonable hard stop for a director of operations who was going to be building a function from the ground up and would have significant control over his own schedule. He said he would accept the position. She said she was glad. He said he was too. The night before his first day, Joel sat on the edge of Maya's bed after she had fallen asleep and looked at her for a while. This was something he had done since she was very small, not out of anxiety, but because there were certain things he needed to remind himself of at specific intervals, and she was the clearest reminder he had. He thought about the years between her second birthday and now. He thought about the apartment they had moved to because the rent was manageable, the one with the elevator that worked most of the time. He thought about the paper calendar on the refrigerator and the magnet that said what it said, and the 6-year-old who had chosen it with more editorial precision than she probably knew. He thought about the agency job that ended on a Friday evening in an email and the Monday morning that followed it, when he had woken up in the same apartment with the same daughter and the same obligations and had decided in the quiet before she woke up that the next version of things was going to be built the right way. He turned off the lamp in her room and went to bed. In the morning, she made him a card. It was a piece of blue construction paper folded in half. On the front, she had drawn 2 figures, a tall one and a short one, standing in front of a building. The tall figure had a briefcase. The short figure had what appeared to be a dog, though the animal was optimistic in its proportions. Inside, she had written, in the careful block letters of a child who was still deciding on her handwriting style, "Good luck on your first day. You will do good because you always do good." He put the card in his jacket pocket. He took it with him. Maya was in the back seat of the car at 3:17 that afternoon when he told her he had taken a new job. She asked what kind of job. He said it was at a company that moved things from one place to another efficiently, and that his job was to make sure that process worked well and didn't break down. She thought about this. She said that sounded like a responsible job. He said he thought so too. She was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the city moving past. She said that Daniela's beagle was named Chester. He said that was a good name for a beagle. She said she was just mentioning it. He said he understood. She looked at him with the expression of someone who had made her case and was willing to allow time for it to be properly considered. The first week at Ardent Logistics was the particular kind of difficult that comes from seeing clearly how much there is to do. Joel moved through the organization the way he moved through a building assessment, systematically, asking questions before drawing conclusions, mapping the actual structure rather than the structure that appeared on the org chart, which in most organizations are related but not identical. He was not loud about it. He did not arrive with announcements or restructuring plans or the particular energy of a person who needs the room to understand that they have taken charge. He asked questions. He listened to the answers. He wrote things down. By the end of the first week, 3 people on the operations team had stopped by his desk to say something that was not strictly professional, a small offering of information about how things actually worked here that went beyond the official version. He took these offerings seriously because he understood what they represented, the beginning of the trust that makes a team function. Nora Chen observed all of this from the measured distance of someone who had made a bet on a person and was watching the bet prove itself out. She did not micromanage. She did not check in daily. She was available when he came to her with something that required her involvement, and she let him work when it did not. This was, he came to understand over the following weeks, the most significant professional courtesy she offered, and she offered it selectively. On the 3rd Friday, she stopped by his desk at the end of the day. Most of the floor had cleared out. He was still there. working through a logistics audit he had requested from the data team. She said she had a question. He looked up. She said the incident on Tuesday, the intersection. She said she had been thinking about it since, and she wanted to ask him directly. Had he known what he was doing when he moved, or had it simply happened? He thought about this for a moment. He said that both things were true, which sounded like a contradiction, but wasn't. He said that the movement had been instinctive, but that the instinct was the product of years of training and attention and a specific way of understanding the world that made certain responses automatic. He said that he had not consciously decided to help the girl. He said that not deciding not to had been the decision. Nora looked at him. She said that was the clearest articulation of something she had been trying to express to her leadership team for 2 years. He said he could put it in a document if she needed it in a document. She said she would let him know. She said goodnight and walked to the elevator. He went back to the audit. Outside the window, the city ran its usual frequencies. The low harmonic of traffic 14 floors below, the lights coming on in the buildings across the street, one office at a time, the anonymous working motion of a place that did not slow down for individual lives, but within which individual lives were nevertheless happening, carrying their weight forward through the ordinary structure of days, making decisions in the moments when no one was watching, becoming, without announcement, exactly who they were going to be. 6 months after that Tuesday morning at the intersection of Caldwell and Fifth, Nora Chen was in a quarterly review meeting with her board when one of the board members asked her to describe the single most significant operational improvement of the year. She said it was the crisis response protocol her director of operations had built and implemented across all 7 client accounts, a protocol that had already been activated twice. Once during a warehouse systems failure in November and once during a transport disruption in January, and had in both cases limited what would have been significant client impact to a contained and resolved incident. The board member asked how she had found someone with that specific capability. She said she had found him at an intersection on Caldwell and Fifth on a Tuesday morning in September, watching a pigeon. The board member said he didn't understand. She said that was all right. She said some things were better understood in person. Maya Castillo turned 7 in March. For her birthday, Joel gave her 2 things. The first was a book about dogs, specifically about beagles, which was accurate and detailed and which Maya received with the expression of someone who has been waiting for an institutional acknowledgement of a position she has held for some time. The second thing was a Saturday morning trip to the city animal shelter, where Maya walked through the kennel area with the focused seriousness of a person conducting a formal evaluation and stopped in front of a 3-year-old beagle named Chester, already named Chester, which Maya found significant, who pressed his nose against the kennel door and regarded her with the philosophical calm of an animal who had decided to trust this particular human on the basis of available evidence. She looked at the dog. She looked at Joel. She said this was the one. He said he knew. She said, how did he know? He said, because she had stopped. She thought about this. She decided it was a satisfactory answer. On the drive home, Chester occupied the back seat with the authority of someone who had always been there and was simply now making his presence official. Maya sat beside him with her hand resting on his back, looking out the window at the city. Joel drove, both hands on the wheel, the way he always drove, the way he always went forward, quietly and with full attention, through a world that did not always see him coming and was, in certain moments, better for it.